Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Football Toolkit at fantasyfootballtoolkit.blogspot.com. I am Lost Cause. Today, we will be looking at the NFC East. Last time we looked at the AFC East, came to some conclusions, followed some rumors, and we'll be doing a little bit more of the same today. Let's start off in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Eagles are looking to go further than what they did last year. They're looking for the Super Bowl. They're looking for the big ring. And they're going to do it behind Michael Vick. In 12 games, Michael Vick put together stats that don't look too good until you realize, hey, he was only playing for 3/4 of the season under center. He finished with 233 completions, I should say, for 3,018 yards, a 21-6 touchdown to interception ratio. Damn good stats. He plays in all 16 games this year. Could we be looking at 4,000 yards? Could we be looking at 30-plus touchdowns? He also had 9 touchdowns on the ground and 676 yards rushing. That was a fantastic rushing performance by a quarterback of all things. Philadelphia just franchised him, signed him to a 1-year deal. After this lockout's done, how many years of a contract is he going to be looking at? 3, 5? I don't know, but I do know that he is in the top 10 in quarterbacks, and if he is around in the second or third round, whether you have your star wide receiver or not, you might want to pick him up. LaShawn McCoy also in the backfield, 207 rushes for 1,080 yards last season, 7 touchdowns. Deshaun Jackson, 47 receptions, 1,056 yards, 6 touchdowns. Playing opposite him, Jeremy Maclin, 70 receptions for 10 touchdowns, 900-plus yards receiving. Really a good receiving core, good running back, solid quarterback, and it only looks better. The reason why I say that it only looks better is because looking defensively, looks like Philadelphia is going to get a little bit stronger. If you do play an IDP, look at Trent Cole, 10 quarterback sacks. Look at maybe Asante Samuel, 7 interceptions, playing opposite Demetri Patterson, 4 interceptions, 1 return for a touchdown, and also some help at defensive back in the draft. And Jaquan Jarrett, a 6-foot, 198-pound defensive back out of Temple, along with Curtis Marsh, 6'1", 197, out of Utah State. Both are hard-hitting, both are athletic, and they're ready to play. On the offensive line, Danny Watkins, 6'3", 310, offensive tackle out of Baylor. He's aggressive, tough, and physical, and it's the kind of presence that you could be looking for to make a transition on the interior. Definitely pass blocking. Getting back, though, to the tight end, Brent Selleck, 42 receptions, 511 yards receiving, and 4 touchdowns on the year. The only problem is in the offseason, he said that he was looking to become a better blocker. He was hitting the weights a lot harder, and that could drop his fantasy value. Now let's take a look at the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys look to kind of an unsure quarterback situation as far as Tony Romo's injury last season. However, if he comes back healthy, which I believe that he will, he'll definitely improve on the 1,605 yards passing and his 11-7 touchdown to interception ratio. John Kitna, on the other hand, could he be dealt? Could he stick around? He's a pretty good number 2 quarterback for the team. Is he good enough to draft? Probably not. But if you do need insurance and you see that Tony Romo could be dancing around injuries, I probably would. At wide receiver, there's a few that you need to look out for. Miles Austin being the number 1. 69 receptions for 1,041 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. Des Bryant, 45 receptions for 561 yards and 6 touchdowns, as well as Roy Williams, 37 receptions, 530 yards and 6 touchdowns. Dallas definitely has a receiving core as long as they have a quarterback that will be healthy and will also be guarded enough to make the plays. Also playing the number 1, number 2, number 3 tight end in fantasy football, and Jason Witten, 94 receptions for 1,002 yards and 9 touchdowns. And now comes the big question mark at running back. Felix Jones and Marion Barber. Felix Jones, 185 on the ground, 800 yards with 1 touchdown, but catching 46 receptions for 450 yards and 1 touchdown. Marion Barber, on the other hand, 111 rushes for 374 yards and 4 touchdowns. They really are piss poor stats for running backs. They're running back by committee, but at the same time, I think Felix Jones is going to emerge as the number one. I think he's going to get the ball a lot more, and I think that because of the draft and Dallas taking DeMarco Murray, 6 foot, 213-pound running back from Oklahoma, I think that you're going to see Felix Jones be the strong running back who can also catch out of the backfield, and I think that you're going to see DeMarco Murray be the guy that he's going to make a really immediate impact with the offense as far as long formations, and also when they're facing nickel coverages. He's a good receiver out of the backfield, and I think that he could possibly be that third down and also the shotgunny kind of running back to throw in there, opposite of Felix Jones, which means Marion Barber, yeah, I wouldn't. Also on the offensive line, they strengthen up in 2 positions with Tyrone Smith, an offensive tackle, 6'5", 307 out of USC, who's strong and athletic. He's a great addition as a run blocker off of the edge. They also picked up David Arkin, an offensive guard or center, 6'5", 300 pounds out of Missouri State. He's a small school standout, and he really looks to help add to the offensive line for the rush. So if you're going after Dallas players, Romo, definitely undervalued. Miles Austin is going to have a good season. Des Bryant, hopefully he has a bounce back, but he still had a good season last year. Don't look at Roy Williams. Stick with Jason Witten, and definitely follow Felix Jones. I'd also keep my eye out on DeMarco Murray, because you never know when an injury is going to happen, and also if he's coming into some of these plays, and if they have these blow-up plays that, you know, Dallas can actually put together, he could be good for a couple touchdowns. And now let's take a look at the Washington Redskins. So many troubles, and let's start with quarterback. Donovan McNabb last season, in not quite 16 games, had 3,300 yards passing, but touchdown to interception ratio 14-15, not going to be gravy until the lockout is lifted. He is the Redskins' number one. Grossman's still there, and you know, you have a lot of people vying for some of these positions, but at the same time, it's the Redskins at this time. As far as the organization goes, and McNabb, well, I've heard rumors back and forth, and I kind of tend to believe that they don't want him there anymore. The only problem is the only thing that they can really get for him is probably between a 5th and a 7th round draft pick, and I don't know if that's going to be enough. On the plus side, quietly, Santana Moss had a really good season, except for the lack of touchdowns. 93 receptions for 1,100 plus yards and 6 touchdowns. That's a decent season, in my mind, for a wide receiver that you can get in round 5, round 6, round 7 as your number 2 wide receiver, and people just kind of scoff at it. Ryan Terrain, 164 rushes for 742 yards and 4 touchdowns. Look for him to start to emerge more and more on the ground as the season goes on. And of course, Chris Cooley, who did have a below average season for Chris Cooley, which for any other tight end, this is their career year, at 77 receptions, 849 yards, and 3 touchdowns. In the draft, the Redskins did pick up some help at wide receiver. They picked up Leonard Hankerson, a 6'2", 209-pound wide receiver out of Miami, in the 3rd round. He's a possession receiver. He's definitely not a burner, but he has some sure hands, and that's definitely something that they need in their under game. Also, they picked up Niles Paul, a 6'1", 224-pound wide receiver out of Nebraska, in the 5th round. He's a physical receiver who could develop into a quality blocker, short yardage receiver whenever needed. They also picked up another running back in Roy Hello, a 6 foot, 219-pound running back out of Nebraska, in the 4th round. He's a quote-unquote one-cut runner, who excels at running between the tackles and is a really hard-nosed runner. So now you have this guy that's a speedy off-the-tackle running back. You also have this change of back that you drafted in the 4th round. You have these wide receivers that are both possession and could develop into short yardage blocking, and you have Santana Moss and Chris Coley. The only problem that you have, the big question mark that you have right now, is quarterback. And now let's take a look at the last team in the division, the New York Giants. Definitely led, no questions about it, by Eli Manning, who finished with 4,000 yards and a touchdown to interception ratio of 31 to 25. While his interceptions were at their peak, his touchdowns and his yardage were approaching career stats for him. I think if they get the game under control off of the line, I think he's going to have a lot more time. And if he doesn't have to worry about anybody else either being injured, suspended, etc., I think that he's going to have a much better season this year, if that's even possible. Look for him to finish with around 4,000 yards, maybe a little bit less. His touchdowns should stay the same, but those interceptions should almost fade away. Next, you have the two-headed giant in the backfield, Ahmad Bradshaw and Brandon Jacobs. Bradshaw finished with 1,235 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns, along with 300-plus yards receiving. And with Jacobs, 147 rushes, 800 yards there, with 9 touchdowns. This is a two-headed giant, but if you take one, chances are you're probably going to see the other one going before you have the chance to grab him. However, Bradshaw is a free agent at the end of this lockout, whenever it's lifted. But he does say that his resigning is the #1 priority. At the same time, 2 sentences later in an interview, he basically said that if other teams come to call, he's still going to give them a look. So while his heart might be in New York, I think that his head is also in the money. Keep an eye out for him. At wide receiver, you got a plethora of them. Hakeem Nicks, 79 receptions for 1,050-plus yards and 11 touchdowns. Also, Mario Manningham, 60 receptions, 900-plus for 9 touchdowns. A free agent in Steve Smith will help complete that wide receiving core with 48 receptions, 500 yards, and 3 touchdowns last season. At tight end, Boss, who slowly is improving to be a top 10 tight end, 35 receptions, 500-plus yards, and 5 touchdowns. On the defense, they're probably the best 1-2 punch in the NFL with 11.5 sacks each, Justin Tuck and Ossie Umenyiora. So look for them in IDPs, but with some rule changes, you might have less production. So I would be cautious, but if you want to pick the best, these 2 guys are probably your best 1-2 combo, and also the New York Giants defense as a whole in a redraft is probably a solid pickup. To assure that pickup, the Giants drafted a corner early in Prince Amukamara, a 6-foot, 206-pound corner out of Nebraska. He's a legitimate corner, meaning that he's not one of these guys that are going to stretch the field and play every single position. This guy is a corner, not a soft blocking corner. The guy's a coverage corner, and he can strengthen any team, let alone the Giants secondary itself. So he's going to probably see playing time before the end of the season, and he's probably going to see a lot of it. And that, like I said before, that just strengthens the Giants defense as a draft pick in your upcoming fantasy football draft. That's it for our look at the NFC East. You can find this podcast as well as every other podcast at fantasyfootballtoolkit.blogspot.com. If you have any questions, any comments, any info, leave them on the blog, or you can send them to my email whenever you feel like it. Take care, everybody.